We are going to create the entities to associate with our database context in this lecture. Remember that the entities are associated with the tables inside of our database. So when we implement code first of Entity Framework Core, we are trying to build the entities that associate with our database model and the tables that relate to that so that we can, in later lectures, perform CRUD operations. Now for the course project final app, which is related to the lecture series, it's going to be a simple entity data model, nothing too complex. When we actually implement our course app, we're going to get very technical in our database model, doing one-to-many relationships to associate with our login authentication. In this case, I just want to give you a basic understanding of how entities work and how to generate our context and implement the different operations utilizing Entity Framework Core. So let's go in here. And as you can see, typically you'll implement in your models folder your entities associated with the database context. But since I already have some class files here, for structure reasons, I'm going to click Add, New Folder. And inside of this, I'm going to name this Entities. And inside of my Entities folder, I'm going to add my class files. Now, typically with your entities, you want to separate them by files. So in this case, our entity is going to be associated with a person, and that person is going to be tied to address information. So in this case, a person is going to be singular, but he can have multiple addresses. So in this case, let's do a person. And then now let's create our address class. So let's go over here and let's click Add, New Class, and let's create address. So now we have a person class and we have an address class. So what will we have for a person? So some of the attributes and properties associated with a person would be first name. Let's do prop tab tab, and that would be a string. And we can say first name. Come down here, we can say prop tab tab, and we can have last name. So some properties that we're going to associate with an individual is first name and last name. One key concept in Entity Framework Core is that anything with the integer and has the ID at the end of the property name will associate with the primary key by default. So if I come in here and type prop tab tab and I leave that as int, and then let's say I name this person ID, by default this is going to be our primary key inside of this when we generate our Entity Framework Core context. Now I'll demonstrate the different types and different ways you can generate a different primary key that doesn't have this naming convention. But right here, always remember that anything with that ID at the end of it and it being an integer, that's going to be your primary key by default. So in this case, we have a public int person ID. We have a public string first name, public string last name. So that's associated with our person. Now with our address, we also want to come in here and we want to say first prop tab tab, and we're going to say right here address ID, and then we're going to come in here prop tab tab. And what are some features of an address? Maybe you have a street name. So let's come in here and let's say street. Let's come in here and let's put string. And we're going to say right here, street name. And then we're going to come in here again, say prop tab tab. And let's say right here we want to make city. Then we're going to come in here and we're going to also create this to say state. And then the last one we're going to put here, these are going to be all strings. We're just going to leave them as strings, not getting into types right now. And we're going to say zip code. Now, one thing that's going to tie these together, because remember, there's one specific person tied to multiple address. So there's a one-to-many relationship. So in the person ID, we want to come in here and we want to be able to pull a list of address associated with that. So let's come in here and let's put prop tab. And in this case, let's make this a list. And let's say this list is going to be tied to the addresses. And let's name this property address. So now when we pull this actual class, we can associate a list of addresses, and you typically would tie that to a person. And then we want to go back and tie this back to a specific person individual in the address. So we can come down here and we can tie this back to the primary key of our person. So let's do prop tab, and let's make this an integer, and then let's match right here this person ID. And then we want to come back here and get a specific person per. So then let's tie this back to the type, which is a person type. My person, that would be better. So here, this is our different entities to associate with the tables inside of SQL Server. So when we actually generate our database context, which we will implement in the next lecture, we will associate this context for these different types in a database set. Then we'll start implementing the Entity Framework core commands to generate this context to our local DB. And then we'll also create a procedure that seeds data into our database by default. So every time we add a migration, we will have default data in our database. So in the next lecture, we'll actually create our database context to associate with our different entities.